Archie, when are you ready to work with a financial advisor?
Well, Jimmy, if you're listening to this now, you just might be ready. Weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. This is Last Paycheck. Welcome back to the Last Paycheck Podcast, brought to you by Hoxton Planning and Management. We're your hosts, Archie Hoxton and Jimmy Such. And today, we're going to be talking about an important question that you may be asking yourself, you may not be, or maybe you should be asking yourself, and that's, are you ready to work with a financial advisor? I think a lot of people sort of maybe disqualify themselves and say, that's for really important people or whatever. Maybe some people say, I don't really know what a financial advisor does, so, and life's busy, so you don't look into it. Those are probably misconceptions.
Yeah, I think we get calls all the time from folks that are curious whether or not they're ready for a financial advisor. And
yeah,
you can when they call us, you can hear the hesitancy, when they're talking to us. And one of the first questions we often get is, I'm not quite sure if I need this or not.
Yeah.
So this is a perfect topic to discuss.
Yeah. Because I think it's fair that not everybody needs a financial advisor. Not everybody needs like a full service, comprehensive financial planning arrangement. A lot of people just need to do a handful of the right things, right? When you say invest your money, spend less than you earn, and try to increase your income, as much as you can. Like those are like kind of the basics that a lot of people start off with.
That's 101.
Yeah.
That's 101. Especially when you're young and you're just getting your feet under you.
Yeah.
You get your new job. There's a few very basic decisions that you can make, and that doesn't necessarily mean you need a strategic financial plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, there are solutions out there for investments that are pretty simple and straightforward that, if you're just getting started, can be a good fit. I think that when you start to hit certain milestones or certain levels of complexity, that's where maybe the decision-making changes a little bit. Like maybe you're approaching a big transition, a big financial decision of some kind, whether it's you're getting close to retirement, you're, looking at buying a house, you've got maybe some sort of pay package that you don't understand.
Yeah, I think when you're starting off, you're so fixated on just getting by, right? You have young kids, you got to get them to school and then to football practice and wherever else and survive the viruses that they bring home, right? But then you get a couple gray hairs, right? And a sore back.
Yeah.
And then your what's important to you begins to evolve.
Yeah.
And you start worrying about like what's next. Am I preparing for, life without work?
Right.
And so that shift, I think, kind of provokes people to begin reaching out or doing some research about what a relationship with a financial advisor looks like.
Right. Absolutely.
Oftentimes that comes, there's retirement, which is the big one. But there are some unique ones, like if you have a child with special needs or some other life events like that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's so many little trigger points that might make you think, okay, this is kind of beyond my understanding. You might even do some digging on the important considerations for a big transition like retirement or special needs, and realize really quickly that you're out of your depth and you don't want to make a mistake that costs you something. So that could be a good trigger point to think, I might be ready to seek out professional advice.
Yeah, it's like the cost of your decisions begin to become very expensive if you make the wrong one.
Right.
And so I think as people accumulate wealth and get to the point of their lives where it's meaningful, they feel like it would be a useful resource to have a professional help.
Right. Also, another thing that happens over time, it's like you mentioned, Jimmy, like cost of your decisions. As your net worth grows, the cost or value added from decisions that you make gets, expands. So like the cost of a bad decision is more expensive. The cost of a good decision or the value of a good decision is much, much greater. Also, another thing that happens is your financial situation gets more complex and the stakes are higher. As it gets more complex, the stakes get higher, the costs are greater. And it could be anything from like your tax situation where you're like, okay, I think I need to graduate from TurboTax and work with a CPA and in sort of the tax world, or, you know, in the retirement world. Okay, I've got all these different types of retirement accounts with each one its own set of rules. How am I going to like pull income from these? How am I going to do this in such a way that, benefits me?
Yeah, I will say oftentimes you do, and we call it income engineering. Like you want to make sure your investments can sustain whatever it is you need to pull from your accounts.
Yeah.
So this idea of income engineering and making sure that your portfolio is able to do that for 30 years or sometimes 40 years is really important and burdensome on some.
Yeah.
Right. It causes a lot of worry.
Yeah. Because there's sort of the sustainability of what you need in your income needs. But then there's also like, where are you going to pull it from? Like when you're generating income, which accounts do you pull from first? Do you pull from a mix of accounts? Like, which one should you leave for last? So there's all these different layers to these questions.
Another unique situation that I find that drives people to us sometimes is that, so in a relationship, there's normally one that kind of drives the finances. And as somebody begins to age, they start worrying, and that doesn't mean they're 80 years old, but sometimes at 50, like, hey, what if something bad does happen to me? My wife or husband, they're not going to have any idea of what to do. They need a resource that they can depend on. So you see those kinds of thoughts creeping in and kind of drives people to searching out a relationship like that.
That's a really common one.
Yeah.
And I think it's important because, especially like you said, there are a lot of people where there is one spouse that does all the finances.
Right.
And another spouse that doesn't know much of anything about the finances. They couldn't even tell you the kinds of accounts, how much money they have, where their investments are.
They might not even have the logins.
Probably don't. Yeah. It might not, like they'd have to reset password at every single time. And so having someone other than yourself to take care of your spouse and help them understand their situation and continue the plan into the future is critical. And where there's already an established relationship. So your spouse doesn't have to, I'm getting into the rabbit hole here, but that your spouse doesn't have to build a new relationship in a domain they're not familiar with while they're already going through the loss of a spouse.
Right.
So that's a great reason. I think I'm ready. I think there's a need to do this, and the need grows every day.
Yeah, which kind of leads us to our next point, which is like when you have those kinds of thoughts, naturally it's like estate planning.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have this idea or some wishes for your money when you're no longer here, and what's the best way to kind of get you to those objectives, and sometimes they lean on an advisor to help them get there.
Yeah, yeah. And an advisor is going to play an important role in it, like kind of helping the estate plan get put into place. They won't normally don't draft documents, but they will make sure that your accounts kind of follow the instruction of the estate plan when the time comes. So
I'll tell you what I want to know. Right. So this is kind of interesting because we do get a lot of calls, and it seems like oftentimes people have their own kind of personal view of what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Right. What do you think an advisor is looking for in terms of working with a client?
Oh, yeah, that's really important. Well, I think often like we're looking for people who have kind of hit one of these sort of trigger points where you sort of bump up against some sort of personal limitation, whether it's your willingness to do it yourself, your ability to do it yourself, or just that sort of anxiety of having to do it yourself and not knowing what you don't know and being aware of that.
Right.
That would be one of the first things if you see that. We don't always see that when someone knocks on the, not that they knock on the door, when somebody walks in and wants to talk to an advisor, usually we see one of these sort of like readiness trigger points. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we see sort of things that we might review as potential, not a great fit signs.
Right.
But I would say that's the first one, is like there's an obvious trigger point where it's uncovered some sort of need for this advice.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the first one that I typically notice. I
Yeah,
think.
and oftentimes it is this, and it's hard for some people, but it's this sense of delegation.
Mm-hmm.
Like you kind of got to be willing to delegate some of these responsibilities. And again, I coach little kid football. They're 5 years old, and one thing they are not is coachable.
Right.
And so,
Yeah.
and so when you work with people in this in our world, you just kind of want to make sure they're willing to collaborate and take your advice. And
Yeah. That could be through delegating and
Right.
saying, I'm gonna delegate these big responsibilities to you. That could be taking advice and actually saying, okay, this is sort of outside of my world of expertise. It is your world of expertise. I'm gonna listen to that and go that route. Because I think if you don't have that, most advisors start to question whether what they're doing is worthwhile in the end for you if you're not going to take the advice.
is it fruitful or is it not?
Yeah, like
Right.
why are you paying? Because you're going to pay for advice. Why are you paying if you don't take the advice?
Right. Mm-hmm.
That's like going to the movie theater, buying a ticket, and then just driving away.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, what was the point of that?
Right. Right.
So yeah, I think that coachability, I would say that's probably the most important marker of whether someone is ready and a good fit to work with an advisor.
Yeah, and we do sometimes people, after working with us or an advisor for some time, almost get retrained, right? Sometimes they walk in here and they're solely focused on performance and things like that, which is a fun conversation, and it's interesting to dig into the investments like that.
Yeah.
But oftentimes it's like, what is this money doing for you? How can it help you accomplish your goals through retirement?
Right.
And so sometimes you kind of got to pull them away from just being solely focused on performance, although it's a component.
Yeah.
It's not everything, right?
Yeah.
Like let's kind of get this marriage between your investments and your goals and make sure that your investments create a high likelihood of you reaching your objectives.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not to, like you said, it's not to downplay the importance of the investments. They're a critical piece of the puzzle. But I think there is a misconception around what financial advisors do, which is at times not unfounded. I mean, there are, when we say financial advisors or financial planners, like there's a wide range of what that might mean. So it's actually up to each potential client to actually ask what the person does, how they deliver value, what you're paying for, how you're paying, whether they're a fiduciary, which we did an episode on that recently. Because I think a lot of people, the misconception is that you go to an advisor and the idea is that they're there to kind of beat the market and their fee is worthwhile insofar as they beat the market. But that's a really myopic and limited view. And if you go to an advisor thinking that that's what you're paying for, in many cases, you're going to have a disconnect. At least with us, there's going to be a disconnect in kind of the focus of what we're doing, which is broader, which is great investment strategy, plus achieving long-term goals in an efficient way, keeping a long-term view on results and saving money on taxes, having a good estate plan, like this whole big picture, you kind of miss that. So I think there's a misconception that can sometimes be a red flag to an advisor that, hey, maybe this isn't a good fit.
And our world is unique in the sense that what our clients view as valuable kind of changes based on the client.
Oh, yeah.
Or based on the person you're working with.
Yeah.
And I'm sure this is the experience of every advisor. Some people just value certain components more than others. Like some people focus on tax strategies. Some folks, focus on estate planning, some on the investment piece.
Retirement success.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's kind of our job to lean into that a little
Yeah.
bit at the same time.
Yeah, that's a great point. A good financial advisor will figure out and help you figure out what you find most valuable through the process and then deliver it to you.
Right.
It might be that you wake up in the middle of the night worried about the markets because you don't know what kind of risk you're taking. You don't understand your portfolio. You don't know if it's going to be enough for you to retire on. Boom. That is what a good advisor will address. It's that big question. But, maybe it's, how do I ensure I've got a good legacy? How do I make sure that my kids don't get stuck with giant tax bills when I die?
And it is funny too. Sometimes the most valuable thing an advisor does, ironically, is almost protect you from your own decisions.
Yeah.
And we're guilty. We make sometimes poor decisions for ourselves, again, outside of financially, but like
we're human.
Yeah, like we have like this human flaw, like this behavioral flaw that sometimes we are just trained to make a bad decision, even if we think it's the best.
Yeah.
And so sometimes the advisors, will help protect you from those.
Oh yeah.
Right.
I mean, we all struggle. I know the thing that I ought to do, and I do
know
the opposite.
I know I should eat this apple, but I'm just going to take the Snickers bar, right?
Yeah.
It's how we work.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. You just nailed my toughest one right there. So yeah, I mean, this is all important, and that's maybe, I would argue, that might be the most important reason to have an advisor, is to make better decisions from someone who's not emotionally and in other ways connected to the situation.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, we could probably keep going.
We should stop,
but we should wrap it up. This is a great topic, a huge topic. So if you have questions about it, leave us a comment with your questions or thoughts. If you have ideas for episodes you want to see, again, leave it in the comments. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, hit the bell for notifications, and share it with your family and friends. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time. You've been watching Last Paycheck, weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. If you like this show, be sure to hit like and subscribe. Last Paycheck is available anywhere you get your podcasts.